Yeah, uh, yeah, okay, okay. Yeah, then I have it activated. Let me know if it's too loud because maybe your my voice is louder than the stream.
So, hello everybody. So I hope today we do not have any technical difficulties. From my side and also from the whole organization part, we want to say sorry again for the inconvenience we had 2 weeks ago. It was our first time doing this kind of remote meetup setup. So we are very sorry. This time we are very well prepared. We did some dry runs, some adjustments around everything. So yeah, to keep things started, a very warm welcome here from Hamburg. Oh, I'm liar. I'm in home office. I'm not in Hamburg. But nevertheless, a very warm welcome to everybody. We are very looking forward to have you, and especially to have really cool talks in our second version of our Flutter and Beyond meetup. To get started, I would like to introduce you to our agenda. Basically, our first talk today is about how to navigate in a Flutter app presented by René. The second talk is about Riverport, so a small introduction into Riverport. It's a provider, but different. Our speaker for this is Patrick. The third talk is about service-oriented architecture implemented with Flutter. Yeah, presented by Bogdan. And our last talk, Flutter with TensorFlow Lite for face mask detecting, is presented by Chris. To give you also a rough overview how we want to make this format of this remote meetup, I prepared some guidance. So we scheduled each talk about roughly 15 to 25 minutes each. And after each talk, we do take some times to answer possible questions from the chat. So in case you have some questions for the speaker or about this topic in general, do not hesitate, just write anything in the chat and we try our best to answer your questions. After our second talk, we will do a 10 minutes break that everyone can grab a new drink, make a bio break, and so on. Yeah, and in the end, we thought about, okay, how can we make this networking thing a little bit more remotely? So we decided to take action to ask us anything. So in case you have any Flutter-related question, we are more than happy to have a broad conversation with you. So also for that, don't hesitate, just ask question in the chat. A small group organization thingy I would like to introduce. So in the past, Claimsforce, so I'm Mike from Claimsforce, by the way. So we introduced this group in Hamburg. Yeah, meetups are really time exhausting, not like exhausting, but time consuming. And most of the time, the daily business kicks in. So therefore, we searched for opportunities that someone can help us. And yeah, we are more than happy to highlight today that we have a cooperation with Netlight. So therefore, I would like to hand over to Eric to introduce Netlight. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mike. You cannot properly see me. My picture is also hidden behind the ticking clock in the bottom right corner. Maybe expect some UI improvements over the course of our remote streamings. Um, I am a consultant working for Netlight. Also, as does Grisha, Grigory. You maybe see his picture also on the bottom, and also Patrick. And yeah, we are also very excited Flutter developers. We want to grow together with Claimsforce, also this Meetup format. And we actually we actually wanted to do it like 2 weeks ago. We wanted to stream the whole thing from our Netlight office in Hamburg, where we have like a stage and have like a good opportunity to maybe also host when we can do it in person again. But also this streaming in addition will be a valid option also, maybe also to do both things. And yeah, we are excited to be part of this journey, and yeah, I'm looking forward to the talks. That's it from my side. Mike?
Yeah, definitely. Let's get things started and let's go to our first talk, which is how to navigate, presented by René. Have fun. Thank you.
So great. Thanks a lot, guys. I hope you can see and hear me now. Just have to position myself a bit and start to screen share everything. Hopefully everything works out right now. Let me just see. So yeah, so hopefully maybe someone can give me some feedback. You can finally see my screen and my presentation. Should work right now. Otherwise, just say something. Maybe just point it out. Okay, so yeah, greetings everyone. I'm really excited to show you some Flutter related stuff. As always said, we wanted to do that 2 weeks ago, but some events were a bit unfortunate and we had to reschedule and everything on. But that's the past, luckily. So today we're here and can talk about some awesome stuff. I hope at least it's awesome for you, or maybe you can learn something about it, ask something about it. And in the future, we might even look up some other topics you might be interested in. We will see what everything comes up. But yes, as said before, my topic will be the navigation topic, or at least I called it how to navigate. The joke should be that the way I wrote it, navigator of content, blah blah, is the way how you do it in Flutter. So yeah, very creative, I guess. But the how to navigate shouldn't be intended to be like, this is the way how to navigate. This is just a way to navigate, or at least a way I have kind of developed for me, which works quite good and scales a bit higher, because usually the problem is that the navigation can get kind of messy later on. So yeah, we will see how that works out. Just a brief introduction to myself. I don't want to talk a lot about it. You can, yeah, I will present some links at the end where you can search me up, read something about me if you're interested in. But just a small introduction. Yeah, my name is René. I'm working at Privacy. It's a data privacy company, so it's not really related to Flutter in any way. But Flutter is my personal passion. It has to be like 2.5 years ago already, or 3 years. I'm not sure. I think it's 2.5 years ago. I started with Flutter because I was like, I am like really interested in app development at all, and started with Swift on iOS and stuff like that, because I'm an Apple user. So I was like, yeah, why not just try out Swift and get in that? And I liked it a lot. Don't get me wrong, but as soon as I saw Flutter and the way everything worked in Flutter and so on, I was like very curious and thought, well, maybe give it a try, because I wasn't too deep into Swift back then. I was like in the beginning and so on, just wrote some sample applications, but nothing too big. And I looked into Flutter and it was like a new world, because the way everything worked was just too smooth to be real, but actually is real. And I like really love developing Flutter and do it like all the free time that I have actually. So yeah, like 2.5 years experience. Like the first half a year was like kind of wasted, where I just tested out all the stuff, but nothing too productive. But then I started to do some real apps and also release like 2 production apps right now. So I've kind of experience in that. Yeah, and just love doing that. So yeah, so just let's take a look and how to navigate in this case. So yeah, the first question you probably would ask, well, I mean, if you're a developer, you probably won't ask yourself this question, but what is navigation itself, right? So depending on who you ask, usually navigation is this, right? So if you say something, what is navigation, someone will open Google Maps or something like that, but this is not going to be the topic we will talk about. So our kind of navigation is how to navigate or how to move inside an application. In this case, our mobile application. So in this example screen, you can see like one main view, like in this case, it's called the drawer, yes, which you can open by swiping from left to right, and you see different entities where you know there will be some screen behind it or something like that, and you can click on it and come to different views in your application. For the user, it feels like they are navigating through the application. Yeah, so that's the thing we want to talk about today. The first thing I want to do actually is show you some examples. Might be kind of boring, but I think as soon as I investigated on this topic, as I thought, okay, maybe I should talk about navigation and develop some kind of navigation in my apps, and always, okay, will I use a drawer, something on the side? Will I use something tab bar navigations like on the bottom? I was more aware of the navigation in other applications, you know? I was like, okay, how do other applications do that? And as more as I looked it up, as more confusing it got. Like, you know, like navigation can be done in so many ways, and so many applications are doing it in really, really, really different ways. And some of them are really good, like they are taking kind of the next step where you can see they really thought about it and thought, okay, how can we improve the user experience and have the navigation like on top? And some other applications are like, okay, you can see they just try too much, right? But I will show you, like, I guess it's 3 examples. I'm not sure right now, 3 or 4 examples. I think it's 3 examples. Initially, I wanted to show you like 10 or something, but it was way too much. But it's very interesting. You should do that as well. Just open your usual apps and whatever app you open and think about how the navigation works, and you will see it's very different in different applications. So, for example, here, this is the iOS App Store, and I just made a screen recording for every, and you can see it's really bare bone. At least it's for iOS, the kind of standard behavior, you know. It's like you have these tab bars at the bottom. You can click on them. They will show different screens, and you can navigate inside them. So nothing too special. As you can see, you can just click on everyone, click on games, go back, and pretty straightforward, I guess. So nothing special here, right? Then I took another example. It's called the HVV app. It's the local transportation app here in Hamburg. And this has a kind of different approach. Like, I'm spoiling a bit because the videos are, otherwise it's too much information, so I'm talking about beforehand. You can see at the bottom, it has a navigation bar as well, just like the iOS App Store. You can see planner, tickets, and timetable right now. But also, if you look closely, you can see in the upper left corner, there's a drawer icon. It's called the hamburger menu, as many call them. It's the button that indicates that there is a drawer behind it. So let's just start the video and take a look at that. So the first thing I do is just, you know, press the tab bar buttons at the bottom bar and go through them, just like the iOS App Store, nothing too fancy. But then you can see I will open the drawer, where inside the drawer, there are many more entries. So there's like like 2 different ways of navigating, the drawer one and the bottom one. But it's interesting is that the first 3 entries in the bottom bar are also in the drawer. So what HVV did is they thought, okay, how can we do it? Like, the most important parts in the app should be navigated quickly. So we do them at the bottom. So planner, tickets, and timetable are at the bottom for a quick access. And all other things are in the drawer, including the one at the bottom. So that's pretty interesting, and I haven't seen it in too many apps. A pretty cool way to do that. And another example, the last example, when I'm correctly, is Discord, because I think Discord has also a very interesting way of how to navigate, actually, because as you can see in this screen, there is a drawer symbol as a hamburger menus icon at the top left corner as well. So we can already think, okay, there's gonna be a drawer in this one. But as we can see, or as we know, maybe, at least I think most of you know Discord, it's a more chat-based, voice-based app. So you can see at the bottom, there's just an entry to input text and some smileys and so on. So the most important focus is to look on to being able to chat and so on. So the navigation is hidden inside the drawer, which is good. But what will happen now is pretty interesting, I think. I will slowly open the door, and once it's fully opened, you can see a bottom navigation is coming up, right? So what Discord did is like, okay, well, if you don't want to navigate anywhere, like you just want to focus on using the app, then we will just show you the main thing, like the chat and the message bar and so on. And if you think, okay, I want to navigate somewhere, they open the door and the tab bar comes up. Another interesting is you have another door on the other side. You can like open the door for the left side and you can open the door for the right side, which shows different stuff. Pretty interesting. Like you have three different navigation stuff, I would say, like the door on the left side, then the tab bar, the bottom bar, which is like coming up as soon as you open the door, and then the second door, or so-called and door as well, on the right side. So pretty interesting as well. So as I said, maybe just after you've listened to my presentation, just take a look on it on your daily apps. Just look at it, and you will see there are very different approaches for navigation inside. Okay, so why do we actually need navigation? So most of you probably know that, but I just want to cover the basics. So usually your application has some kind of depth, you know, you want to have some main aspect, usually like, I don't know, chatting or networking or something like that. And you still want to have different kinds of like aspects of your app where you want to do very different stuff, like not related to your main aspect. Maybe the most common way is, for example, settings. If you have some view of settings where you can toggle some kinds like layout stuff or the language or something like that, you want to do that separately. You don't want to have like one big view where everything is inside and you have to just scroll everywhere just to get somewhere. Navigation is usually used to separate stuff, both visually and logically. And that's what I just said. You have to make a comparison between when do you want to nest stuff, when do you want to nest content inside each other, and when do you want to really separate it. And that's where navigation comes in place, where you say, okay, no, this thing is like really just a whole other topic. I want to like separate it. And that's when you really say, okay, I make a new view and you can navigate there. And as we already saw, there are different ways to handle navigation, and it's usually depending on the framework itself. Yeah, like the framework gives you some ways to do that programmatically, like how you can access navigation stacks and how you can say the application to do a navigation and so on. And it obviously depends on the use case, as we saw before, how you want to navigate. There are different approaches to do that. And one lucky thing is actually that for the basic stuff of navigation, the framework already has a lot of things covered, and usually some, as I called it here, well-established navigation systems. For example, the drawer or the bottom bar, you don't have it to program it like from the scratch. You usually have already access to that stuff in some way. So that's good as well, right? What I always say, it's kind of dry thing to say, but the documentation is always a good place to start looking for that kind of stuff. And at this point, I just want to point out that the documentation for Flutter is like really good. I'm following some people on Twitter, which are like developers at Flutter and so on, and they are like always saying like, yeah, I know Flutter is cool and so on, but did you see our documentation? Like they're really proud of their own documentation, which they can really be, because a lot of things written down in their navigation, in their documentation, in the Flutter context is like really good. And so I can just tell you, so take really a look into that. It's really, really great. A small sneak peek at this point, since we are in the Flutter context, Flutter has had a major update in the navigation system. As you can see in the screenshot, maybe you already saw it, Flutter is talking about navigation 1.0 and a 2.0. Since Flutter 1.22, I guess, the new navigation system is live and accessible for everyone, which has a different approach. And it's actually kind of different to the usual approach of how to navigate in Flutter. And I could just cover a whole presentation just for this itself. So that's why I'm going to like exclude this one right now, since it's too new And a lot of people are already kind of complaining and saying, yeah, I don't know if this is actually the right direction and so on. So it's still like too new to say if this is the correct, the better approach. And everyone else has used the 1.0 navigation system before until now, and the most people will probably stick to that. So I'm focusing on that one. Okay, so let's get a little bit more deeper to Flutter itself, to the so-called Navigator. I think many of you, since you are watching a Flutter stream right now, you probably know some stuff about Flutter. So Flutter has a lot of so-called widgets. Flutter uses this approach where you say you have everything is kind of a widget, and you just pack a widget inside another one. So you got like this big tree of widgets, which at the end will just explain your view. You will just, like the old time, like HTML times, you will just explain, or declarative way where you say, okay, I will just use this widget inside this widget inside this widget, and at the end this will result in the screen you want to build. And Navigator is one of those widgets. The Navigator widget is, in the first way, not a visual widget like many widgets are. It's more of a widget which is logically used, like in this case, obviously, to navigate. And the most people who really didn't thought a lot about navigation already used it, and maybe didn't ask themselves, why can I do that? And the short answer is, well, Flutter already took care of that, because usually the most of you will use Material App as one of their root widgets, or Cupertino apps. It's the pardon in the iOS world, but usually you go with Material App. And inside Material App already provides us with one navigator. And this is the navigator we usually use. So in your code, you probably already use something like Navigator of context, and wanted to access this navigator, which is exactly this one, and do some stuff like pushing stuff and popping routes and so on. And the Navigator widget is basically just a stack of widgets, like really easy said. But the main purpose of this Navigator widget is to hold a stack of all widgets, usually view widgets, and push them and pop them to be the current view, the current widget. Basically not more, but obviously there's a little bit more behind it. So these are like general use cases of what to do. Like you want to push a new view. So what you do is like calling Navigator off, providing the build context from where you currently are. Usually you are inside the build method, and you call like Navigator off, and you want to push a new route. So you call the push method. And then you have to explain what kind of route it is and what kind of transition is going to happen. So there's, for example, the Cupertino page route, there's a material page route. You can write your own one just as you like. And then at the end, you describe which widget you want to display, usually a view. So I wrote here Cupertino page route, since I want to do a iOS-like transition. And this transition should push to the new view, the home detail view. And you can also do the second one is push named, where you are not explicitly telling us the navigator which navigation should happen and to which view. You just like say to which location you want to go, for example, /direct, and you already explained on others on other points how this should be handled. I will come back to that later. And the other way what you can do is usually you want to push views, and the other thing you want to pop routes. So you want to go back, as we can say. And usually that just have to call the pop method of the navigator. Or another way, what I just wrote down is pop until, for example, the home route. So you will like go all the way back in the stack until you hit one route, which is called home. This is usually used, for example, when you have some kind of wiki app, for example, where you go deeper and deeper from item to item and deeper, and someone you want to get, okay, I want to just go back. I want to go to the back navigation where I can go somewhere else. And then you usually have some button to go right back to the first screen, for example. Okay, now I can show you, or I want to show you how the navigator is placed inside the widget tree. Most of you probably or hopefully heard of the widget tree, which is just what I described earlier, this widget inside widget. So what Flutter is essentially doing is building this big tree of widgets, like they are layered on top or inside each other. And here I can see there is one navigator on top, and this is the one has been provided by Material App. And we can see this is the navigator. Inside there is a setting view, there's a scaffold, so the usual business from our custom widgets. And I just closed the settings view so you can see it. So right now, what we have to focus on, we have the navigator, and the first entry in the stack of the navigator is my settings view in this case. So what I do now, somewhere in my code, I wrote navigator of context push, and I want to push a new road. So the user probably clicked on some kind of button or something, and this triggered this code where I push a new view. And what happened then is, you can see, just like what stacks do, they put the second view, in this case the about view, on top the other view. So now you have the settings view still there. Well, the user probably can see it, and on top of it the about view. So this is just what I wanted to stress out here, that the navigator is basically just this holding a stack of widgets it's showing, and just knows on which order it is, and can push and pop them. And I teased this topic a little bit earlier, like 2 or 3 slides before, where I said there are like 2 ways of how to navigate. I called it the named routes and the pure instance routes. The pure instance route are the route where I directly state which kind of navigation, for example, Cupertino page transition, and to which widget, where I said home detail view, for example. And the named routes are the ones where I leave out this fancy stuff and just write push named and the name, for example, /home, /direct, whatever it is. And this is like the main difference between them. So the named routes can be somehow seen as if you have this kind of routing table, which you maybe heard of other frameworks. Angular is doing it in a similar way, where you define routes by names and then use these names. While pure instance routes, you don't care about such kind of naming and routing tables and so on. You just want to push this widget right now. So we will focus on named routes here, because I would say I'm a big fan of named routes, but I think the majority of Flutter developers are a fan of named routes, just because usually as soon as the application, the project scales, gets bigger, using pure instance routes gets messy real fast. Yeah, because on the named routes you have the upside that you will have some kind of routing table. Yes, so somewhere in your application, I will show it later, you will define how these routes will be like what name they are and how you will transition to them. So new developers, or if you are a team of 5, 6, whatever developers, it's easier to agree on those routes and look them up later on. If you rely on the pure instance routes, it can get messy, because you don't know exactly where someone pushes which view, and you lose the oversight of what is happening where. So usually you use named routes in bigger projects, and as soon as you come to the point where you see the benefits and maybe have been in bigger projects, you will never go back usually, because once you get used to it, it's actually pretty straightforward and pretty good, I think. So here's an example for that. You can see at the top left corner, I defined a property which is called routes, where it's basically a map, where I say the key of the map is the name of the route, for example, /home, /statistics, settings, whatever it is. On the right side, I declare a function which basically just says which kind of widget I want to present, right? So on the left side, for example, /home, and on the right side, I say home view. So I know later on, okay, once I want to call home, it knows, okay, he wants to go to the home view. I don't have to say it again somewhere at the code. And then I go a bit deeper. You can see the material app, what I said most applications use as one of the routes widgets. There is actually one property which is called routes itself, and is just waiting for just like this property, which has this way, like this map, and a string and the view. So I provide this. So now my material app knows that this is the routes I want to define. So this is my routing table. Yeah, this is my routing table. And on the other property is on generate route, where on generate route, you define what you did earlier in the pure instance routes. Here you essentially define how routing is done. You say here, okay, it's a Cupertino page route, just like before. It can be a material page route, whatever it is. And the parameter you get is settings, and the settings contains the name, which has been declared on top, like home, statistic, and so on. And once you provided this kind of code, like this routing table on top, and the onGenerate route function, once you've done it, you can work with what I just saw. You can just call push named, the name, and everything is done on their own. You don't have to think about what is a view, so which widget should I actually call, and which transition. This is all done by itself at this point. We still have some kind of problems if we use this approach because we have no auto-completion. For the first thing, what you might do is you will call navigator off dot push named, and then you will like, okay, so what route do we actually have? You will eventually have to go back to wherever you wrote it down and look it up, like, okay, which kind of routes do we actually have, like home, statistics, and blah, blah. And if an application gets bigger, you might have like, don't know, 10, 20 different routes, and you probably won't remember every, so you always have to go back and look them up. So auto-completion would be great at this point. What could essentially happen as well is that you mix route journeys. So for example, you have one route which is home, and inside home you have, don't know, home detail component, yes? And now you're inside the home detail, and no one is stopping you from calling navigator off, push name, settings from there. But maybe this wasn't intended. Maybe it's a bigger project, and there's like one big vision of how the app should work and from where to where navigation should actually happen. But a developer might just, don't know, haven't thought about it or whatever, and just call a push name to settings. No one is stopping you. The code will work, and you will be able to navigate to settings. But as I said, probably not what was intended. So mixing routing journeys can actually happen quite often. And the last thing, more complex setups. As I said, yes, there are many ways of how to navigate, like having a drawer, having a bottom bar, showing dialogues or whatever. So there are many different ways of how to navigate, and having it all in this routing table, just as it is right now, as I showed earlier, can get confusing because you will have like, I don't know, 20, 30 of those entries, and you still don't know, like, okay, so when do I use which of those? And okay, does it work like this? Is some of them restricted to only my tab bar? It gets confusing really fast. So these are problems we still have. We would kind of have them still if we use the pure instance routes, but these are like ones we have now as well as in the name routes. So what I do now is I will show you my example, which I have kind of came up with. Like, don't know, I just had these problems on my own, obviously, and so like, hey, how can I improve this? And what I did is I made a combination of using enums for that, combined with extension methods. Extension method, just a quick introduction. Maybe some of you don't know extension methods. Extension methods has been introduced in Flutter, like version, no, not in Flutter, in the Dart SDK in like 2.6, 2.7. I think it was 2.6, where they introduced extension methods, because there was one fundamental problem you still had in Flutter or in Flutter using Dart, is that you probably want to enhance classes which are already there. For the easiest example would be, for example, think about string as a class itself. You can do a lot of stuff with strings. You can call substring, you can call length, you can call whatever. And maybe you think, okay, in my application, I really often have to, don't know, to transform my string to a very specific kind of format, like having some slashes inside, whatever it is, a very specific form. And you usually would have to write some kind of helper functions to achieve that. And this can get really messy to do that, because you will have a lot of this helper functions everywhere, and you don't know, okay, where can I use it? Is it only for strings, or what is it? So they come up, okay, we have a solution for that, and this is the extension methods. So what you can do now, at least since Dart 2.6, what you can do is you can write an extension method, call it whatever you want. For example, my cool functions, and at the end you write on and on which class, for example, on string, and then you can write functions like transform to cool string, And once you've done it, later on in your code, you can just, for example, go and on any string and at the end write dot and then call this function as if it was a function from string from on its own. And that's the cool thing about extensions. So you can extend classes which already exist. And the thing is that enums are pretty bare bone in Dart. Usually other frameworks or other programming language have already advanced enums where you can, for example, stringify enums, have like string name them and so on. But in Dart it's pretty bare bones. The only thing you can do in enums is like declare names for those, and that's it. So enums is just one half of the solution. The other half is using extension methods together. So I show you some examples. Maybe you will see it easier. So let's get back to what I showed you earlier, the navigation stuff, not the Google Maps one, the cooler one, the app navigation. This was one of the screen on top. So this is like the view the viewer gets if he opens the drawer. You can see that there are different entities or different entries which should open different views. For example, the home view, the quest views, characters view, and so on. And now we want to navigate to these parts. So what I did here, I was maybe a bit too fast. Here are the entries: home, quest, characters, items, settings. And now I translated them to an enum where I said draw entry enum, and I have the same entries: home, quest, characters, items, settings. So these are already type safe just by declaring an enum where this enum's name is draw entry, where you know, okay, this is a draw, something draw related, and then every entry. Now, the first thing I tried to do was extending it, but you see in Dart, you can't extend enums. So, okay, that's not a way to implement any kind of methods. The second approach was trying to implement something. So I can maybe try it that way to get some kind of functions in there, but that's also not possible. But now comes the part for the extension methods where I can say extension, any kind of name. I usually go with draw entry and just functions at the end. You can call it whatever you want. And then at the end, just what I said earlier, on which class, on which type in this case. And in this case, on draw entry, just what you could do on string. And here I can actually write functions. And one function is, for example, name, and one is I just took icon for this case. And name will give me the name of how it should be named in my drawer. So later on, I can call this, and I can show it here. Yes, I can call draw entry dot home and then dot name, and it'll give me home. So later on, I even have auto completion for how it should be named in my drawer itself, which is pretty nice at this point. This is now more complex. No worries. This source, I wrote this application just for a showcase, and the source code is on my GitHub page. I have some links at the end of this presentation, so you can access everything slowly on your pace as you need it. So don't worry. I just make it pretty fast here because the actual explanation would be maybe too long. But what I did here is, okay, now I want to do the same thing with the roots, because I said /home and /question and whatsoever. It's hard to remember that, and you don't want to look it up. So I combined them in this root method, where I essentially say, well, I return a map entry. I say the name /home, for example, and then where it should lead to my home view. And I do that for every root I want to have: home, quest, characters, items, settings. I do this for everyone. Yes, where I said the key is the name, for example, home, and the value from the map entry is where we want to go. Now we might have the case that we want to have deeper navigation. Like, for example, you are in the items view, where we defined the items page earlier in the map entry, and now we've gone one step deeper. The first thing you could do is just extend this method and write more entries there, like items and items detail, items very detail, whatever it is. But that gets messy as well, because then we have all kinds of navigation in this one map entry, in this one function. That's too much probably. So what I do for this kind of stuff is I declare an initial additional enum just for the additional routes inside one navigation. For example, in this one, I write items routing key, like what additional routes do I have in item, this case detail, and write the same stuff just for this one. Like in this, I say, okay, takes the root from before, like /items, and just put detail at the end. And now I can use this as well. I will show you this example later on. And here at the end, I just have to combine one roots property again, because I will provide this to the material app, just like before. Just we have done it before. It has some syntax sugar which has to be used here, which has to be read and understand before. But as I said, as soon as you look at the source code and try it out on your own, it's pretty straightforward. It's just a little bit too much probably just to explain it in this presentation. But just think about this will be the roots property we provide for the material app, just like before. And now what I can do finally is in the drawer, what I just saw you, the whole drawer implementation is basically just this, where I just explain, okay, I have my list view where I want to show all the entries, and it's a list view because I don't know how many entries it can be. It could be way more than I showed, and then I just iterate over it. So I can call draw entry dot values, which shows me all enum values this enum has, and just iterate over it, and then access to icon, which shows the icon, and dot name, which shows the name. And on the on tab property where I want to actually navigate, the only thing I do is I call navigator up, push replacement in this case. It could be push named as well, but I wanted to replace it in this case, and just call to my root key where it says the /home. So at this point, I have auto completion for all the entries I have in my drawer. So I can just call wherever a developer might be, and he's like, okay, damn, I just added a new drawer entry and I want to edit. He just has to go to this enum and add this value, and everything else happens on itself, which is pretty nice. And now if I want to do the other navigation where I go from items to from items to detail items, I can just look, okay, are there any routing keys for item? So I just write down item routing key and I see, oh yeah, there is one. And I just call dot, and I see every navigation which is for items routing. And I see, oh, there's detail. And I can just call it. So you have finally auto completion, and it will generate on its own. So it's pretty nice from this point. And as I said, it's a pretty fast forward because, as I said, it's a bit much. But you can look everything up in these examples. I have one draw example, which I just wrote down here. You can access it later. And I have a navigation by example, which is a bit different, but basically the same, where you can look it up and see that once you know it, once you've tried it out, it's pretty straightforward and pretty cool because you had auto completion. It's type safe, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I think that's about it. As soon as you look at it and try it out, navigation can be done in a lot of different ways. And I think this whole navigation topic is probably relevant for bigger projects. So individuals might not have thought about it too much at this point, which is okay, no problem. But you will see that once you build a bigger app, a bigger project, maybe in some kind of development team for bigger stuff, you will see that using bare bones navigation is probably not good enough and probably too messy. And using some kind of way, and this is just one way, there's obviously a lot of ways, but using one way like this can help and can improve and can make your life easier later on. It at least made my life easier. So I know I use this approach for every my application. It's a no-brainer for me now to do any kind of navigation because I know just write it down in enums, this functions, and call it down. I know the names and easy to go. Yeah, you can visit my GitHub page. You can come to Twitter, hit me up via email as you like. Get in touch with me if everything. If there's anything you want to know, want to talk about anything, I'm happy to collaborate or to network in any way. And I hope I could give you some insights, some cool extra knowledge about navigation, and would give it up to the moderator again.
Great, thanks a lot, René. It was a really cool talk. Even though it was not 25 minutes, but all good. We are still in time. You talked that many times about hamburger menus, so I'm now getting hungry. But that's a different topic, you know. So I will hand over to Grisha. So Grisha, do you spot some questions in the chat?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Now I spot some of the questions. One of them was by Damien Bust. can't you put your roads in an enum static class for the autocomplete, like main access.max something?
Yeah, sure. You can do that as well. At the end, it's preference, and as I said, it's about scaling. You know, like this might work just fine. You might just think about, do you want to have all kind of different static properties, and maybe later on it might be, because what I have a problem with static properties is you don't really know if they are like how they are related to each other. You know, there might be that. If you write it good or write it down, this static this class with static methods or functions good, it might be the same case. But usually such methods can be mixed up, or you don't know, is it together, or do I use it in another approach? By going with enums and extensions, you are sure that you call methods exactly on this enum, which represents views at the end. So I think this is like the easier or most straightforward approach, but it doesn't mean like it's the way. Like I said, I had started actually with static methods or static properties as well in the beginning, and transitioned over to them. Maybe because I'm a little bit biased with extension methods as well, but it's preference.
Good. That's one. And there is another question by Peter Zygmunt. He asks, why don't you use auto-road package? It's generated code with annotations and has also autocomplete at the end.
Okay, that's basically a more fundamental thing to discuss. Usually, that might be some biased answer as well, but usually I want to avoid using too many packets, too many dependencies. You know, this package might go well, yes, and it might perfectly fit your case, but stuff like this, for example, especially if it's auto generation stuff or generation stuff itself, it's usually very like you're fixed on that. For example, if you go on this and it works quite fine and everything's great and so on, you might come to a point where this package might not be enough, where you're saying, oh, it would be great if this package also did that or did whatever, and you might be stuck with that at this point. You maybe have to do a fork of this just to add other way of handling that just because of your use case. So if you're like 100% sure that this approach does fit your project and your way of programming, of course, go for it. There are some really great packages out there which probably do stuff better than yourself, if we are like really honest. So this auto-generate package might be really good, but usually I try to have approaches on my own as good as possible and see if I can achieve everything I want with myself. And I see there is something easier, I try to look at different packages. I hope this answers your questions.
Good.
Yeah, I do also have some questions, especially if it comes to pass parameters to roots. But let's postpone this question to our maybe Ask Us Anything. And
sure.
Thanks again, René, for your presentation. I would like to introduce now to the second talk, which is Introduction to Riverport, provider but different, presented by Patrick. So, Patrick.
I'm here.
Great.
Let me just share my screen, or my presentation, more to say. Takes a second for the upload. There you go. I hope everyone can see it. And then, yeah, thanks for the handover. So my presentation will be an introduction to Riverport, provider but different. Who am I actually? I'm Patrick. I'm with Netlight as a consultant since September of this year, mostly coming from the JavaScript full stack world. And I stumbled upon Flutter roughly 1.5 years ago when I had an idea for a small app in my friendship circle for event generation, because I was not really liking this way of using WhatsApp for events. And then I stumbled upon Flutter and I really liked it, and I could get the grasp pretty fast of it because I think it's very entry-level friendly. And yeah, I'm more or less an entry-level Flutter developer. I used it for several small passion projects, but not in like a big productive application. Coming to my agenda, as I already stated in the subtitle, it's saying provider but different, it sure makes sense to take a look into what provider is. Then going on, what shortcomings does provider have? And then what is Riverport actually, and how does it tackle those shortcomings? I want to show you some smaller coding examples and then close my presentation with a conclusion and an outlook. So let's start with what is provider. Provider is a Flutter package at the moment out there in version 4.3.2+2. It's mostly community driven, but the biggest part is written by Remy Rousselet, a name that you can already write down because we're going to hear it for another time in this talk. And what it's actually used for is, as you can see on the right side, dependency injection. I know that Grisha, for example, used it for dependency injection at a client, but we're not going to take a look into this part for this talk. We're going to focus on the state management part, that it's used for state management inside of Flutter applications. And it's actually quite popular in the community. I know there are, as for example, with navigation, different variations that you can take for state management, like scope, model, or block. But this one, provider, is very popular in the community. It's as popular that it was featured in the Google I/O 19 last year, in a talk about programmatic state management inside of Flutter applications, where they also said that they're using it at Google for internal projects. So it's rather famous. Yeah, if we're talking about state management, it sure makes sense to get a quick grasp of what state management is. Components inside of a view in Flutter applications can have a state. For example, a button can be disabled or enabled, so you can click it or not. And most of the times between different components, there are dependencies. For example, you have a form where you have a text field, and only if there's like a valid entry that was validated, then the button should be enabled so you can click it. And as you might think, this can get rather complex for large applications or very complex UIs. And one thing you could think of how to tackle this is like sharing state between those components or widgets via globals. But this is kind of bad, as everything can read or modify them, and it makes testing quite hard. So how does provider tackle this problem? It's an object that, first of all, encapsulates a piece of state, and secondly, allows for listening to that state. And that's done technically as a wrapper around inherited widget, which is a Flutter widget. But it cuts down the boilerplate code to use this inherited widgets to the bare minimum, which makes it very easy to use. And as René already shown, we have this widget tree in Flutter applications. And if we now think of an example where we have a state at the very beginning of an application, for example, the root even, and we want to use it in a component very deep into the tree, then we have to pass it all over as parameters to the different components in the tree so we can get it where we want to use it. And if we want to change it there, then we have to lift it up via callbacks all the time. And if you're familiar with React, this can get rather tedious also in Flutter applications if you're just using stateful widgets. And those inherited widgets allow for more efficient rebuilds as with stateful widgets, because when a stateful widget changes, it rebuilds everything below it in the widget tree, which can get rather expensive if you have a change very high up in the tree. And with inherited widgets, you can just register for listening of the state on an inherited widget, and then only those widgets that are registering for the state change do rebuild, which of course makes for more efficient rebuilds, as only those widgets rebuild that really have to. But there are of course some shortcomings, and I just skipped them, sorry. Some problems to provider. There's, for example, runtime exceptions, this famous provider not found exception, where no provider is given. Then you have a nesting hell when you have to set up all providers at root level and then get your app and wrap around all those providers that you want to provide inside of your app. It's rather tackled with multi-provider, but it's still not a very great variance to use, because you still have to put every provider in there. It's depending on Flutter. Combining providers can be difficult, so it's not that easy to, for example, make a provider do something based on the state of another provider. And you can't dispose providers that are no longer in use. For example, if you're fetching something from Firebase and you're done with it, it's not able to just close the connection, for example. And something very bad was having two providers of the same type wasn't possible. So what is Riverport now? Tackling those shortcomings of provider. It's more or less provider 2.0, again, written by Remy Rousselet. And it's there in 3 different packages: Riverport, Flutter Riverport, and Hooks Riverport. And with Riverport, for example, it's usable in pure Dart code. So one of the shortcomings is tackled with this one. And we're going to take a look at Flutter Riverport later on in this talk. And Hooks Riverport is a variant that can be used with Flutter hooks, also written by Remy Rousselet, which makes the API a little bit easier to use. And whenever you're interested, take a look at riverport.dev. This is the documentation. It's very good, probably way better than my talk can ever be. So if you have like any questions or want to get a more deep dive into the topic, just go onto the dev side. But what else does it provide? It does provide compile safety, so no more provider not found exception. If it compiles, then it actually works. So if you're able to write compiling code, then you're sure getting a value out of your provider. And it tackles some other limitations, like multiple providers of the same type are now possible. You can add providers anywhere, so not just at the root level of the application. You can just provide them wherever they are actually needed and logically belong. And you can also dispose them when they're no longer in need. So let's take a quick look at some examples. I will be using the infamous counter example that you get when you set up a new Flutter project. First of all, of course, we had to add Flutter Riverport to our dependencies. Then what we're going to do is we wrap the whole application in a provider scope. This provider scope will be picking up the different providers that we create somewhere in our app. And one of those providers, for example, is the standard provider that you can see right there. We just create a number provider that returns the value 0. It's a provider of type int. And then on the right side, you can see how we're going to use it. Below the scaffold and center widget, you see a consumer widget, which gives us access to a watch method. And there we can just pass in the provider that we created. And then we can, as you can see in the text widget right below, just use this number that we can get from out of this provider. And if you do not want to add another widget to the tree, there's also the possibility to actually use this consumer widget and just extend, for example, my home page from the consumer widget. Then we get from the build context of the build function also the scope reader's watch method, and we can just use it in the way that we used it before. We can just grab the number out of this provider by calling watch on it, and then we can use this number. But of course, this makes for a pretty bad counter example, as provider values from the standard provider can't be changed. And well, a counter that can't be changed is not really of any use. So let's take a look into a provider that actually allows us for a working counter, which is the state provider. We just make it a state provider by prepending state in front of the provider that we created. And then inside of our application, as you can see on the right side, we can just again call the watch method on the number state provider. This time we have to call .state on it, so we actually get the value of the number state provider as it's a state. And then as you can see in the floating action button on the bottom, we are using an increment function that we pass in the context. And we have this one declared further down at the bottom, where we just call the read method of the context, pass it the number state provider that we created, and then we call .state++ to increment this counter by 1. So we actually have a working counter this time. This is a very small state. It's just one number. So there's a different option that you can do, and that is to create a change notifier by extending the change notifier of the Riverport package. That's what we did on the left side. I created class number change notifier. And this now has like an int number that is 0, but there could also be like a second number, for example, or a string. So it allows for a more complex state of the widget. And then we can actually create different unique methods. For example, there we're just calling the number ++ again to increment it. And then what's important in this part is that we have to call notify listeners, because otherwise the widgets listening to this state won't rebuild. So this is always important that you call notify listeners in a change notifier. Yeah, to create then a number change notifier provider, we will just take the change notifier provider and pass it our type that we created, the number change notifier, and return a new number change notifier. And then on the right side, you can see how we call it. We just call it again with the watch method. And then looking at the text where we are using it, we have to call the property on it that we actually want out of it. So in this case, it's the number. That's why we're calling .number. And in the action button on the bottom, you can see we again call context.read, and then we pass in the provider that we created. And then we can just call one of the functions that we created. In this case, for us, it's the increment method that we did right. And then we still have another working counterexample based on a provider provided by Riverport. Something else I want to show, it's like not of any use for a counter again. It's a future provider that's also in Riverport, which can be used, for example, for fetching data. In this case, I'm creating a future provider that just has a future that resolves to the value of 0. And then how to use it again on the right side, we just call again the watch method and path of the provider that we created, this time the number future provider. And then on this number future that we are getting, we can call the .when method. And then we have a loading indicator if the future is still resolving. We have an error if it did not resolve, or if it resolves, we have the data. And then we can just call the toString method on the value that we get as it's an integer. And then we have our number again, and we have our 0. So those are the providers that are inside of Riverport. And just a fun fact that I just put at the end now, some of you might have already seen that Riverport is an anagram of provider. So that's like showcasing the connection again. We talked about provider, state provider, change notifier, and future provider, but there's also state notifier provider and stream provider for working streams, for example. And if you want to get more insights on those, just check out the documentations. Can't highlight it again. It's a very good documentation with several different examples, and it's really worth watching out. So coming to a conclusion and outlook, Riverport is actually a very straightforward and easy way for state management inside of Flutter applications. It does tackle some of the shortcomings that provider has. But as an outlook already, it won't replace provider in the near future. So provider is still going to be maintained. Merging both projects would existing projects break, as they're functioning quite different under the hood. And as providers really community accepted, it has to be shown if Riverport also is getting this community acceptance. And that's something that has to be shown. So yeah, thanks for listening. If any questions, feel free to ask.
Great.
This was my talk on Riverport.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Patrick. Yeah, I mean, a counter which is not countable might be in some situations good. Maybe if it comes to election or something like that. Okay, but never mind, different topic. Grisha, do you see some questions in the chat?
So far I didn't see, and I think we should also stick to the schedule. So let's try to don't take the break and continue. And at the end, we might have some questions coming on to ask Patrick. So let's continue.
So you would recommend now to jump to Bogdan. So it's a question to Bogdan. Bogdan, are you ready? It's spontaneously.
Of course, I'm ready.
Okay, cool. Then I would like to hand over now to Bogdan. He would like to introduce us to service-oriented architecture implemented with Flutter.
Yes, thank you. Let me share my screen. Here we go. Okay, so basically, I wanted to share with you how we are developing our applications at Claimsforce, and of course, one of them is a Flutter application. The topic of service-oriented architecture is not really connected to Flutter directly. It's kind of a bigger topic on its own, but my example application will be Flutter app, and I hope you find it useful and interesting. And maybe I will just trigger some interest for you in future to read about this topic. So what is this service-oriented architecture? Why do we use it? Why do we believe in this? So basically, if I could give one word that, I don't know, would be a good reason, this would be a scalability. And it's, so it's not about how many users your app can handle or how many records the database holds or anything like that. It's not like only software specific topic in general. And so we will talk about this now. So here at Claimsforce, we have a lot of ambitious plans, let's say, and we are growing very fast. And I remember the old times when our mobile app was actually touched by one developer because we had only 4 people in tech working in some different areas. Now we have multiple teams and around 20 developers, and basically everyone can contribute to the same app, and hopefully without breaking any other piece that he didn't change, or being confident that the changes are good and he's not blocked and he can just basically work, right? So we want to have our teams focused and productive, right? And to implement this software-oriented architecture, those are actually 2 parts here, right? So first of all, you have to organize your teams accordingly and then apply this in the software, in the way you write your software and you deliver, right? So those two topics we will talk about today. And so this is the $1 billion idea I give you for free. This example application called Chores app. Chore, by the way, I don't know, I just realized this word recently, that this is some kind of a home routine task you do at home. And basically the goal is to motivate family members to do chores and take responsibility. So imagine you have your investors on board, you have your teams and developers ready to start working on this. You really believe in this app, you see the potential. I mean, clearly, right? A lot of features we could add here. But so now is the question, how do we organize our teams? How do we make sure that we can grow as a company? Because we also believe that we want to, I don't know, make double the team size or stuff like this. And we still want to be productive and have the fast delivery speed. So a few slides about the team structure here. So one classic example would be, okay, I take my backend developers, I put them to one team, and I take my front-end developers, I put them to another team. And basically, most likely front-end guys working kind of independently, and backend guys are working independently. And then some features come, like create the chore. So how would it work, right? So you give it to those teams, backend team says, okay, we are start working on this. Front-end team is blocked and waiting for something from the backend team. They could start, I don't know, making some UI widgets, but in the end, they cannot deliver the feature until it's done by the backend. Then the backend is done, and the front-end realized that there is some missing fields, and then the ball is again on the backend side. So basically, there is no clear ownership, and if you have those teams like this, so they will always be dependent on each other, and this is how you will not scale fast as a company, right? So most of you maybe already have this, like, it's 2020
We have cross-functional teams, and I bet you also do microservices and all the stuff, which is very nice. And we can work independently in those cross-functional teams, and we have backend and frontend in the same team, and everything works fine. Yeah, this sounds good on the picture, right? So let's imagine this is the suggested way how we could organize our teams. So we say one team is responsible. I don't know if you see my mouse pointer, I hope you see. So one team is responsible for chores. So it has some kind of description. I can assign it to somebody because I want to motivate people. I will give it some kind of score and then some status, it's done or not. And then I have another team. And those, as you can see, those blue and green guys are representing different skills and expertise in the team. So it could be also front-end developer. Those are kind of cross-functional, right? Back-end developer, front-end designer, and whatever. And the same roles we have in this team. And this team now is actually working on family members. So family member will have some kind of name. It probably belongs to some kind of family. And each member, if we look at our screen in the past, has some kind of collected points, which you can later exchange for rewards. And then there is another team, maybe we could create for rewards. And the use cases would be like, yeah, I want to create my reward. I want to give it some kind of price, some good description. Maybe in future I will connect it to Amazon, some referrals, I don't know. Some use cases are working fine with those teams, right? So we create chores. Yeah, clearly belongs to this team. We want to update some profile. Clearly belongs to this family team. They can deliver independently to some point, but then one of the obvious features comes and it's claim reward. So now I want to claim my reward. I have enough scores or points accumulated and I want to spend it and take this reward. So what would happen here? Where do we put this, first of all? So there is piece of this scoring logic in the chore itself. So you kind of based this value on this one. So there is already some kind of dependency between those two. And then when you say I want to claim reward, first you have to make sure that you have enough points for this specific person. And then you also want to list those rewards that are available. And then somehow you want to let them know that I actually want to claim this one. So I don't know, do you still want to offer it for future or remove it from your listing or something like this? So there are a lot of dependencies just in this claim reward. So this one will also not work, this team structure. So what we try to achieve at ClaimsForce before we even start writing the software is to organize our teams properly. And we should organize it around kind of the business capabilities we want to work on. And because those capabilities, processes are working with the data, so to put it simply, we organize it around the data that has to be together, that is changed together and kind of serves the same purpose. So instead of saying like chore team or whatever, we say there is one team that is responsible to cover the doing those chores, the homework process, routine process, whatever. So you probably want to be able to create, to assign, to update, maybe to duplicate, to reschedule, to whatever. Another team is the membership team that is responsible for all those invitations, processes, and I don't know, some metadata, image, picture, and stuff like this. And another team is responsible to motivate, right? And those two teams on the left, they kind of look like secondary team when it comes to how important or the core of the business is. And this one is very important. So maybe you want to keep, I don't know, best employees here and have test coverage here and stuff like this. But once you notice that they have the different definition of the same entity, right? So this team doesn't even know about something like that. You can actually receive rewards from this chore, and the chore that defined in this team is completely different than here. And because the total amount for this specific person is calculated based on his performance, and if you want to claim your rewards, you want to work on all of those three numbers, probably it just makes sense to have those numbers together. So this is the suggestion how to organize your team. So, and if you say your team owns the specific data, it owns this data all the way to the front end. So what we say, the artifact of every team is actually a library of widgets, nothing else but library of widgets, for example, Flutter widgets, which we will cover in the next step. So basically, to put it very simple, the outcome of this team or every team is some kind of package with widgets, and that's it. And then there is obviously there is some kind of place where you just have to bring those widgets together, which we call branding, or where UI composition happens. So this is your actual app. It's kind of not really owned by any team, but it's kind of like shared responsibilities. But because there is no logic and you cannot go wrong with placing your widget, you always can go wrong, but the risk to go wrong here is very low because you are just like building a Lego blocks here. You're just putting widgets together, and that's it. So basically, what about this UI? So if you look at it here, it looks like a one record here. So for example, here, this chore, but behind the scenes, those are completely different services involved, and completely different views are brought together on this screen. So for example, when you want to say, let's say you want to show a map view in your app, what you do, most likely you will use existing solutions. So you add this map package, maybe Google Maps package to your app, and then in your widget tree, you just put map view as it is. And the suggested way here is the same. There is some package which gives you a widget to show a person profile, and to use it, you need to give it some kind of ID, right? So in your widget tree, there will be some widget called profile picture, which takes ID, and it renders the picture in some specific way. And similar to, I don't know, the claim reward widget, for example, this number here. So basically, those are widgets are coming from different packages owned by different teams and coming together. And I try to somehow visualize this. For example, the purple package, or I think one represents kind of a chores app. This guy knows about all family chores. It knows about some descriptions of those guys, but it doesn't know about, so it knows about assignee ID, but it doesn't know about anything about his picture or his name or what is the reward stuff. And when you want to bring those widgets together, of course, you have to somehow structure it properly. So this is, now we are going a little bit technically to show you how we are doing this in the code. So for example, a specific example, actually this form, right? So when you want to create something that looks like a one entity, those fields are actually serving completely different purposes, right? So this is some kind of description, metadata here, due dates, but the reward is actually there to motivate you. And the motivation team could easily decide that, you know what, we don't want rewards, we want something different, or we want to introduce some badges or whatever. And in the moment you press submit button, every data goes to corresponding service and is persisted there, and then it's rendered, of course, coming from the same service. Yeah, so now we will go a little bit into the code. So for example, when we say we have this list of chores, and so the purple team will give you a one widget which says family chores, for example, which gives you kind of the all chores that this family has with represented as IDs. And then from there you want to build your list. So your list of items. So there we have this helper widgets, just to make it a little bit structured, which is nothing else but some kind of card with some kind of column, and then we go again. So the purple team or the chores team has this widget, which takes chore ID but renders the chore description. And the chore reward is coming from a completely different package. One thing I realized, it would be helpful to have some imports here, right? But you can imagine that this import and this import are coming from completely different namespaces, from different libraries, let's say. Yeah, they are just different. It's not one of the widgets that lives next to this one. And basically, yeah, you can see that it's kind of coming together. The composition of UI happens here, and there is nothing else but just the widgets. You don't put logic here, and this is also the interesting part, because you don't care if this guy behind the scenes uses some block, some state manager, or whatever, or it always makes the backend call or whatever. You don't know this. This is up to the team to decide. So maybe the name of the people, of the person, or his picture is something you can cache for a lifetime of the session. But the list of chores, something you are working with often, you probably, oops, you cannot cache. How do I get rid of you? Ah. Sorry, I don't know how to get rid of this. Any hints? Ah. Okay, sorry. Yeah, so yeah, I was talking about this one. So basically, you don't know how this list could work, right? So some data you can cache longer than the other data. Some data you want to be like always refreshing, and you always make a call to the backend. And this is something you can keep behind the scenes. But when it comes to the composition, this doesn't really matter. So another example here, something we can later check in the source code if you are interested. The widget is called Composite Form, which means all sub-widgets of this form will be submitted when you press this button. So we say this piece of form is coming from one place. This other piece of form is coming from another place. And this widget is actually already some kind of a composition of some widgets where we want to see the list and make it selectable. So everything is possible here. And then when you press this button, behind the scenes, this button actually submits the form and then does something else. So the source code of this you can check on my GitHub. I will share you in a second. And yeah, basically, this was, as I said, the idea was just to trigger the interest. And of course, those teams and services would communicate with each other. They should have some kind of, I don't know, events going on between them. There is also some kind of called IT operations, something that actually covers all of them. It's kind of cross-service responsibility, like authentication, authorization, how to deal with it. This is something we didn't talk about, but it's kind of a topic on its own. And also how to do this styling. So you do styling in one place, but somehow behind the scenes, all those widgets are styled accordingly. So I mean, some hints would be using some kind of theming probably in Flutter, but it's also an interesting topic, let's say. And that was it from my side. I hope you find it interesting. You can also check the source code for this app on this link. And yeah, if you have some questions, I'm very big fan of this topic. The biggest person who inspires me about this one is Udi Dahan. Maybe you know him, maybe you not, but I definitely recommend you to check his talks. And I must say that we are pretty successful with applying these practices in our company, and we feel productive even if we are growing fast. So yeah, I hope you find it interesting. Back to you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Bogdan. But just to clarify, not only the backend guys are behind, sometimes also the front-end engineers are behind. Good. Do we have some questions, Grisha? Can you tell us?
I don't see so far any questions. Maybe there will be some. I also know that Bogdan has a Medium article about this. Yeah.
Yeah, you can find it in the GitHub repo.
Okay.
There is a reference.
Yeah, we will share this link in the chat very soon. But first, let's hand over to our last talk today, which is about TensorFlow Lite for face mask detecting, presented by Chris. So Chris, it's your turn.
Yo. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Okay. So let's go to the first page. Yes, I'm Chris. Yeah, today my topic is about Flutter using the TensorFlow Lite to finish the task like face mask detection. So first introduce, I'm Chris. I'm Android. I was Android developer 10 years, and since beginning of this year, I started working on Flutter, and joined Moya, where the company I'm working, since 2018. And currently we're working with 3 to 4 people in Flutter, including Grisha, the host of this meeting, and also plus some QI guys. So the Moya, first Moya is a new ride sharing service in Hamburg, based in Hamburg, also in Hanover, in Germany. So you can take 5+ people to reach different destinations. For small marketing, you can download both Android and iOS app for your booking trip. So before we start topic today, let's first do a recap on naming machine learning or AI, or we should call this AI machine learning anyway, etc. So the relationship between AI and machine learning, so since the 2017, I think if you still remember, in this year, the machine learning or AI suddenly exploded because of different ideas from Facebook or Google. So at that moment, you see a lot of implementation like chatbots, AlphaGo, driverless car, or facial detection. So AI were like a comeback thingy since the TensorFlow library, which will easily be used. Yeah, the AI is a solution that to solve different intelligent tasks with computer, of course, and it's based on different tools or libraries. We call this as developer. So machine learning is one kind of tools that can help us to implement AI solution or AI task or missions. So the normal workflow of machine learning, if you are a machine learning engineer, maybe you're so familiar with it. Here I recap this. To finish the machine learning project, you normally do certain steps like collect the data or train, and then you train the model. The train model is iteration steps. And also after training, you have to deploy your model. So the first step is collect the data. You see, data can be a form of table, like Excel table, which you lay out the properties we call features, and with the class, the category you want to target. And the data could also be some like images or photos you use for certain case like facial detection, or the case I introduced today, the face mask detection. Then after you get the data, the next steps is, as mentioned, is training your data. This is an iteration steps that you can execute these steps for more than one or, and let's say 3 or 4 times again. However, in order to save resource, normally we put these steps in the cloud or remote, or do some other independent service. For example, Google Cloud is one example. Google provides various different ways to train directly. And also AWS, Amazon is also a alternative chance for us. Also the Microsoft Azure is also in this playing club. The final step after your training, as mentioned, is deploy your model. You get the model back from the cloud normally. Actually, I train my model in cloud and maintains the model. If you find the model is not so perfect for your task, you will return to the training model step again. So you transfer your model normally from web directly or from cloud directly. or deploy them to the mobile device, for example, iPhone, Android phone, or other phones, so-called on-device machine learning. So transfer from web normally is very straightforward through different cloud providers like Microsoft or Google Cloud. And deploy on the microphone the mobile device is normally just downloaded and deployed. There are also some service you can do update on air like Firebase. This is another topic, but Google really provides a certain solution that you use Firebase and upload your local on-device model directly through the Firebase downloading. Task for mobile dev, as I mentioned, we call this on-device machine learning, short on-device ML. So face mask detection with ML is the topic that we talked a lot or discussed a lot in various companies like Uber, for example. By the way, you can download a Uber. You can see a Uber news, a Uber-related news about face detection. Recently, they released a feature that before the driver start the work, they should be checked whether they're wearing the face mask or not, because of the COVID-19 protection. So let's see, before we really start our topic today, you can find the concept online through the QR code if you scan it. If you can't get full information for today, you can just check this documentation or link you can download. All models I provide, they are all provided inside this text or documentation. So the knowledge background, you should have the knowledge about TensorFlow, especially the Keras. Keras is a short way or high-level API of TensorFlow that you don't have to do a low-level looping logic. And actually, Google prefer that we should all use the Keras, which is high-level API for normal or basic applications, or let's say the simple applications. It's really straightforward if you use Keras instead of using the TensorFlow raw code. And for mobile deployment, you need TensorFlow Lite. It's an open source deep learning framework for on-device inference. It simplified TensorFlow operations, and it can be backport for different devices and mobile device especially. It's well saved, for example, the resource. It will also improve the let's say the energy topic. The final one is the Flutter. Now, maybe today all audience here are Flutter developers. I don't have to introduce what Flutter is. But again, for this topic, face mask detection, we need those knowledge in your head. So let's start short. So to do, as mentioned, normal steps of machine learning is data. You have to prepare the data and collect your data. Then you have to train your data and build a model. So these steps are almost included all machine learning project. And finally, we download model after we train it and deploy it to the device directly. So the final step is create a camera-based Flutter project. So because you have to detect your face with your mask, you need a camera library. There is official one. And final copy the model to the Flutter project. Use the camera to consume all video streaming and evaluate perform with the model. First step, our data types are photos or images. Collect photos with two categories, with mask and without mask. So our inference is wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. Our data set contains with mask, without mask. The data set means we will create a local folder or directory with 2 subdirectories with mask and without mask, which contains different photos. If you have difficult to get photos, you can just scan the QR code to download the photo data sets from through this link directly. So it can save you a lot of time to grab the images from Google, etc. The next step is training your data. Let's call machine learning step 1. Use Variant, a Jupyter notebook. You can do this. And it's the IDE that can write a Python code directly, or use Google Collaborative. We call Colab. It's actually the Jupyter notebook in cloud. For this workshop, I used the Colab to complete my script. And using the TensorFlow Lite model maker script. This script is a short way to train model based on per-trained model. You can download through the link I introduced later. You see, you can write the code to train your data, but recently I find another alternative way to train your data. You can try the Microsoft Lobby. Lobby is a desktop app, provide a camera. You can collect your data. In this case, it's photo directly from the camera on your laptop or computer with the Lob app to shoot down with mask and without mask category. So as mentioned, for this workshop, I use script to train the data. And if you want to visit the source code, just scan the QR code and find the script there. It's very straightforward, and even a lot of Google TensorFlow Code Lab is containing this script, but just with small adjustment. So the first step to changing this script is provide download place where provide the download set where you provide your data set, which contains with mask and without mask subdirectory. If you have this make script, then you have to introduce 2 dances. For our case is with mask and without mask. If you see my mouse, take care. If you want to edit your make model script, just take care that you have to change number 2. For the third alternative, like without mask or another XX mask, then you have to change to 3. But it's another topic. After training, you can then download your model. For Kyoshin, our target is to deploy the model to device. So you have to convert from normal TensorFlow model to the TensorFlow Lite model. It will do a small polishing to make the model smaller and eliminate some unsupported operations. More details, you can check the official introduction of TensorFlow Lite. The documentation is very straightforward. Then the last step is build the app which can detect your face mask. So create a Flutter project with IntelliJ, of course, Android Studio or Visual Studio Code, even with command line, you can do this. And add any kind of camera plugin. There's a Google official one. Of course, you can find third-party support. Also, add TensorFlow Lite plugin there. There is TF Lite library. This is not official library by Google, but you can use this library fully supporting because this library is really up to date. But there's another TF Lite library which is doing the similar task were introduced by Google in the summer code this year. It might be further supported. But however, as mentioned, for this workshop, I used the TF library or Flutter TF Lite. You can search it from internet or per GoogleNet. Then the final step, to copy the model TF-Lite to the lib assets directory, where you look your model contains the with mask and the without mask inference. Then set up the camera and some overlays or UI elements for colors or indicators for your output or streaming. So if you check out the source codes, you'll find the core of this project is to scan the stream of the camera and put it into the TensorFlow model, and then we'll give you the output of the detection or the inference. Then you can evaluate whether you have the face mask or you don't have the face mask. Normally, there are 3 or 4 cases with face mask, absolutely. Then you don't have the without face mask, or Visa, you have without face mask, and you don't have face mask. So they will be provided with the score or the confidence value. So then you build it. The final output or the build result is look like this. After the screen is stable, the whole app can silent check whether you have face mask or you don't have face mask. Yes. As mentioned, this project is just simple step and straightforward step to do the face mask detection or the pipeline for machine learning mobile project. I'm very interested in mobile solution and AI, so that's why I contribute in this topic. Especially recently, we have the COVID-19 issues, so face mask is like a monitoring tool for us or for our daily life if we go public transport. So the whole project can be downloaded through the QR code. Then you find all source code and all download the link, and also the documentation I introduced at the beginning of the workshop. Anyway, if you can't catch the fully information or fully what I'm now speaking, so you can check that documentation. There are more details. And because I'm also Android developer, I also provide a native Android version, which is doing the same stuff. You must use the Jetpack Camera X to support the camera. Also use TensorFlow Lite Android version. Yeah, the Gradle tool must be 1.4, otherwise you will really have difficult to manually deploy your TensorFlow Lite in it. However, Google recently released the version, Android Studio version 4.1x. Then you can use the Gradle tool 4.1 to deploy your TensorFlow Lite straightforward. Again, you can also check out this GitHub link, then you will see. Actually, the screenshot I shared today is based on Android, but they are the same UI and the same working. Thanks all. Just check out the QR code, then you can connect me if you like the mobile solution plus machine learning solution or the machine learning on mobile. Welcome to get questions, and let's give back to the host, Krisha.
Or me, Mike. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Yep.
Yeah, very nice talk. So maybe you can turn off the screen sharing, and every one of us can now turn on a microphone and cameras, that we can come to our last agenda point, which is the Ask Us Anything session.
So how can I turn off it? Yeah.
Yeah, so beautiful. Now everyone is seeing us. Great. I don't see any questions right now in the chat, but maybe the guys are a little bit shy, or maybe there are coming questions along the run. But maybe I do have some questions, especially for René, regarding the navigation thing. So, what is about passing route parameters? Is it also possible with your solution, or are you also struggling with this kind of situation?
No, you can also do that as well. Passing arguments is actually part of the push method itself. So in push named or push replacement named, for example, you can pass arguments as part of the named parameters. It has one called arguments, where you can just pass any kind of object. And what I usually do, if I really use this a lot, like passing arguments, like for example in my last app I passed the scroll controller so I can manipulate the scroll controller later on, so I had to pass it to next screens. And so what I did is in my the whole code I showed was inside my helper class, my routing helper class in this case, where I write like wrapper functions for those push functions, where I just wrap them, and like type safety, where it has some interfaces, so I know which kind of arguments I can pass. Usually you can pass whatever you want since it accepts object, but I'm like kind of this type safety dude, so I wrap such kind in helper functions, and there I define specific types, so I actually know what kind of parameters I can pass here.
Okay, cool, great, thanks.
So I see now some questions coming up. Thank you for the great answer, René. And also I want to thank you, Chris, for the presentation. Really nice to see the machine learning plus Flutter. And you also did it in Android, surprisingly. So Kevin Hodendijk, I hope I pronounced the name correctly, asks, what is a good way of handling deep linking, like navigating to a specific route when the app is initially started? Who would like to answer it?
I could go for it, since it's a bit in my topic related to navigation itself. So deep linking is a bit specific, because this is also platform dependent a bit. Because, for example, on iOS, you have to define specific schemes to enable this deep linking at all. And there are different ways to do so. For example, you can work on the HTTPS base, and which routes to any kind of server, which therefore routes on your application. Or you can have, like, for example, if I'm not mistaken, for example, Twitter has its own scheme which says Twitter / and then the path and so on, and directly routes into the Twitter application. And so the first part you should actually do is reading the documentation about deep linking for iOS and Android itself, because it's handling differently. And then on top, actually, for this kind of stuff, since deep linking itself can get kind of messy doing it on your own, there is one very good package for that. It's called Unilinks, I guess, something like that, which handles most of the stuff for you. So you just have to think about which kind of scheme you want to use, universal one or app related, and then this stuff handles most of it on its own.
Yeah, I also remember, Chris, we used one of the libraries in our app. Was it also Unilinks?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I remember that I guess we are close. Are we using branch.io, Bogdan, or dynamic links from Firebase? So there are, I guess, plenty of options.
Yeah.
Good. Then there is another question. I think this is the most famous question in the Flutter universe. What is the best way to learn state management? Or in general, the state management topic is huge. Who would like to say something about
it? Yeah, I can tell something about it. As I started out in the early ways, usually most of us has the first thing we worked through was using set state everywhere, and trying to update the UI and having all the parameters and all those little widgets. And this worked out for until a specific point where you thought like, oh damn, I have to do something which has an implication or another screen or whatever, where you have this kind of cross information which has to go from screen to screen or from widget to widget. Once you separate your widgets more and more, as I started, I had like bigger widgets where I thought, where is the problem? Everything works out quite fine. But as soon as I separated widgets into smaller parts and into views and so on, it was like the small bits. And as soon as I wanted to update something inside, I was like, okay, how do I do this? So what do I do now? And actually, the first thing that I came across was Provider, because it is probably one of the most endorsed or liked package on PubDev. I think it's like really on top, this Provider thing. And once I used Provider and saw that, okay, it can do both kinda. It can give state down the widget tree wherever you need it, like pass it down, and you can like exit this from everywhere, and you can even change stuff. So it was like, okay, nice, it works even. And then I had like some minor problems with Provider, and then I started to dig deeper and look what are different approaches for that. And there are many resources like Reddit or Twitter and whatsoever, where people have like big lists of different approaches like Block, Redux, MobX, whatever it is. They're like really good and nice lists of different approaches, and most of them have pretty good documentation of their approach. So my suggestion would be, look up for such lists or such examples, and look at the documentation and see if any of those approaches fits you. Because at the end, a lot of it comes down to preference. There may be some performance-wise topics or even whatever, but mostly comes down to preference. What you like? Should it be more like feature-wise or more stream-based, or should it be like declarative? Whatever. There are many different reasons why to choose one solution for it.
Yeah, I guess also if it comes to debugging, right? So
yeah, true.
Debugging is also a thing as soon as we are talking about state management.
Yeah, I think the approach is just just choose one and stick to it, and just try
trial and error.
Like this is how you get
and how we earn money, right? It's just about trial and error. Come on.
Yeah, right.
Great. Do we have another question?
Yes. So there is not a question, but rather the suggestion. Manusoft writes that I think the state management is a huge topic and it would be great to hear different perspectives in other meetups. So I think this is something that I would like to also maybe do in one of the coming meetups, to have a talk about that. And there is another question. How about creating ML app with teachable machine website? Can someone elaborate on that? Maybe I didn't get the question quite well.
Machine website. It depends on what actually is meaning with teachable machine websites at this point. Well, I mean, I can't really grasp the base of that question. I mean, machine learning, as Chris said, has many fields. At the end, as long as you have some kind of data which can be categorized, you can do some kind of machine learning with it, I guess.
Yeah, or maybe it was a question that maybe Flutter for Web also supports TensorLite. Do you know this, Chris?
Yeah, sure. Actually, there's a TensorFlow JavaScript. If you build the TensorFlow Lite, of course, if you build the Flutter web app, of course, you should collaborate with the TensorFlow JS. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Good. There is a thank you, and at the beginning, which state management to start first? We already said that it's hard to choose, but like I started with Provider, and I think most of the people start with Provider. What else? How do you approach testing in your professional projects? Oh, that's actually a really good question. So I'm curious to hear about it from others.
Yeah, Grisha, maybe you can start.
No. Please start.
I want to withhold my answer.
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends on a lot of things, right? I mean, usually for example, if you are like developing in the context of some kind of project, for example, in a typical consulting way, where you have like a specific budget, specific time frame, you really have to make sure to define a scope for you where you said, okay, you can define some kind of base testing and still work on time for the application, so it can be rolled out on time. And usually testing is not so focused because the customer wants to get the product out, right? So it's still important to find as a group, as a developer group, to find some way to have a baseline of testing, but not overshoot it, while in the end having like, I don't know, 80% test coverage, but the application is like lacking one half year still. So that's not the point at all. I think for me at least, the best way of testing was to go on some kind of integration tests where I use some kind of scenarios where I wrote down like some real case scenario where I said, okay, the application has been used on this way, this tab has been used, and this has been done, and then I expect some kind of outcome, like for example, this widget is shown, this widget has disappeared. So I like this way that Flutter has this driver test where you can like really behave some automation tests. I think having some of those is good because it some kind of behaves user experience. And the other thing is widget testing, where you can, like, for example, test some basic stuff. You have to find a middle way of both. But I personally like the integration test. But it comes down to the group or to the developers.
I can also say a few words right now. So in the project that we've been with Chris, we didn't invest a lot of time in testing.
Yeah.
Again, the deadlines. But we try to define some way to include tests at some moments. And I think for Flutter project, or like in general the project, it's really nice to have this driver test, the integration test that kind of checks the whole integration. And this testing pyramid that looks usually like this, it looks for me more like this, or more like a fat shape. I think it's better to invest into the integration test and also cover the business logic with unit tests. So this is like the minimum approach that I would take with Flutter.
Yeah, I would also say regarding, we use clean architecture, for example, in our project. And they're also like, we don't use any Flutter driver tests at all, but it also was mainly like a timely issue. We want to look into this also maybe in one version or another. But as Grisha said, like unit tests for if you're familiar maybe with the clean architecture approach, like you have use cases basically for your different pages and for your different features, and these are definitely things that you want to test, maybe also to check like if errors are thrown correctly, like that the whole business logic itself works properly, which is more important, for example, like for like a B2B app, of course, than like a user-facing app, maybe where like the workflow is more important, where you could use Flutter driver more intensively. But also when you mainly have like this list detail page kind of application where you have to process lots of data, you want to make sure that like everything is displayed or loaded without an error. And then for this case, like you test the use cases. But maybe we can already also do this as a topic in a future meetup. Maybe I can present it. I'm just thinking about this, how to approach it in that sense. But these are just my 2 cents on this topic.
Nice, thank you, and Mike.
Thank you, no camera guy.
Yeah, I was supposed to just moving my mouth that the guy thinks I'm talking.
I will organize a webcam for next time.
Oh,
promise.
Great, Eric.
And also 1080p resolution for the stream.
Yeah,
we promise.
Yeah, Grisha, I guess we do not have, or personally, I do not have experience with testing, so I would just skip the question for me, to be honest. Maybe we can answer one more question, so the last question, because we are running out of time.
Yes, let's ask.
I spotted one interesting one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Peter asked, what is about CI for Flutter?
Yeah, that's That's a good question. I wanted to ask it also.
So I know that we at Claimsforce, we really struggled with everything. So we have, I guess for iOS, correct me if I'm wrong, Bogdan, but for iOS, we went to Azure because of Apple machines, because of the whole iOS certification thingy. We need to have runtimes for Apple machines. And the only provider right now in the cloud computing systems is Azure. So there's no support from AWS, there's no support from Google Cloud. So we are now running on 3 clouds. Yay. And for Android, it was really straightforward. So AWS with code build and code pipeline, that was really straightforward. But for iOS, it was just a huge pain. What is your experience?
I think Chris can say something because
yeah, actually we are using the Bitwise, the company-wide. Yeah, it might be the historical. I mean, from the background of the mobile developer or mobile sector in our company. That since I joined here, we use the Bitwise, and because of Bitwise, we can use different plugins. For example, the Flutter plugin example, and also use the Play Store plugin to deploy the final APK to the store. Yeah, for iOS also we use, because we deploy our iOS version in our own way, we don't deploy to the Apple Store. So this kind, we don't use the CI, just manually upload to the store. The fully bundle of Flutter building, we use the Bitwise Flutter plugin there. And it's very straightforward to do this. For different builder variant, for Android, we use flavors. And for iOS, I believe we use different certification, like a general iOS solutions can deploy to staging version or to the production version. We use the flavor for Android to deploy for staging or production.
I can say in a nutshell, it works great. So really,
yeah.
Like I was surprised by that.
But honestly, how much time did you spend to make the CI work?
Yeah, actually, we really use more than 1 week.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Okay.
I can agree on that. I actually use Bitwise myself. I know of 2 newer versions from that Code Magic, which enables Android and iOS Flutter pipelines, and Bitwise. And I chose Bitwise because Code Magic had some sketchy price models. At least it seems like it. And Bitwise was pretty straightforward about how many build cycles you are allowed per month and so on. And I set up Bitwise for Android and iOS. Works both great, but took a lot of time actually. Yeah. That's the negative part, because there are some things you have to. I mean, usually it should be straightforward because, as Chris said, there are plugins for that inside of Bitwise which should take care of that. But because of different versionings and so on, it can get kind of messy, and it took some time. But I actually got it to work, and right now it actually is like if I want to push a new version, I just switch the branch to the production branch, create a new version, just push a new version, and everything else happens automatically, and my version is someday live as soon as the app stores approve it. So it's actually pretty cool once it's set up, but yeah, it took some time.
Once it's set up, yeah. Maybe this is a good closing note.
Yeah.
What do you think, guys? From the organization part, I would like to thank you, all of you. So René, Patrick, Bogdan, and Chris, thanks a lot for your talks. Also, thanks to the chat for the questions. We made some notes how we can improve the next meetup, and we try really our best to make it better over time. So we are more than happy about feedback. So just write in our meetup group about feedback, and we try our best to apply it. So in this case, I would say to all of you, stay safe, stay healthy, and enjoy the rest of your night.
And check your face mask.
Yeah, of course.
And to you.
Before you go.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
guys. That's great.
See you.
See you.
Right, see you. Bye, guys.